The Labour government's decision to terminate the Latin Excellence Programme, is more than just a cost saving measure. It's a philosophical stance that undermines, I think, the true purpose of education. Education, after all, is not merely equipping young minds with practical skills or filling minds with facts to meet the needs of an ever changing economy. It's about teaching students how to think, not simply what to think, and few subjects achieve this as effectively as Latin. In fact, I can only think of one other subject that gets anywhere close, and that is maths. I was taught Latin when I was quite young, and I was taught it by a ferocious Latin teacher who looked a little bit like a leprechaun, like a vicious leprechaun. And I remember him hitting children. It was terrifying. We went to bed in tears, with demands to be word perfect in our Latin recitation the following morning. And I don't wish that on anyone, um, but the discipline of learning Latin at an early age is still valid. Uh, it's because it's a language that works, that is almost perfect. Its study demands attention to detail, logical reasoning, and intellectual precision, exactly like maths. If you want to describe something, you describe it accurately and clearly, and you can do no better than to do that in Latin. And if you want to think of something, you can. You don't need to take lots of books, because Latin is a simple language that can be done on the trot. As the as one might say in Latin, solvitur ambulando. It's something that can be solved by by walking around. Um, it's it's a skill that transfers to other areas of life and learning, fostering analytical thinking and problem solving abilities. And to dismiss it as elitist is to misunderstand its true value. Latin is not the preserve of the privileged, but the antidote to intellectual laziness. And the decision to cut the Latin Excellence Programme mid year is particularly galling. It's about a spiteful and a misunderstood attempt by the present government to attack what they see as privilege or elite, and they're wrong. This program, established in 2022, has successfully brought Latin to over 5,000 pupils in economically deprived areas, with a third of these students eligible for free school meals. And by cancelling the program, Labour reinforces the very elitism it claims to oppose, leaving Latin predominantly only in the domain of private education. Now, I think a lot of the books which I use to teach Latin, and by the way, I've done it, and I've done it with some of the modern textbooks, are twaddle, rubbish, because they deal they don't give children the building bricks of Latin declensions and conjugations until well into the course. You should get those quite early on, so that you can start the process of learning when your mind is fresh. You should learn Latin early on, because it's great fun to be able to do it. And Latin, once you've got it, Latin poetry is extraordinarily naughty and very bold. And it then translates into Church Latin, which is equally remarkable and is a living language in the Vatican. And currently, fewer than 3% of state schools teach Latin, which is appalling, while 60% of classics GCSE entrants come from independent schools. How then can we expect to challenge this inequality when such initiatives as the Latin Excellence Programme are scrapped? I'm quite determined to try and keep this up. So I will be starting a Patreon program, and one of the things I will be offering will be Latin lessons simply, and I will do a series of videos, which some of which will be on here, and some of which, if you want more details, will be on the Patreon site. Though you have to give me some time to get all those lessons ready. Latin epitomizes learning for its intrinsic value, much as maths does. Far from being outdated or irrelevant, it opens doors to literature, to theology, to rhetoric, to culture, to Greek, offering students a richer interior world. It nurtures intellectual curiosity and imagination, allowing young minds to experience another time that is both alien and strikingly familiar. And if measurable outcomes are required, consider this: Latin students advance their English reading age by 36 months in a single year. I think with Latin, and particularly if you then add Greek to the mixture, your ability to spell in English is almost faultless, because you understand where words come from. You understand the etymology, not a Latin word, a Greek word. In an era obsessed with STEM subjects, Latin provides balance. Its so-called uselessness is its strength. It teaches students to think beyond utilitarian parameters, Latin word, to engage with abstract concepts and to appreciate beauty, logic, creativity for its own sake. Cancelling it signals a dangerous retreat into the soft bigotry of low expectations, where educational ambition is sacrificed on the altar of austerity and utility. Labour's curriculum overhaul, with its focus on relatable activities like graffiti workshops, and I don't discourage graffiti, I think it's a very interesting art form, rather like rap, risks narrowing students' horizons rather than broadening them. But write the graffiti in Latin. The arts, do remember that scene in not The Last Temptation of Christ, the Monty Python one, Life of Brian. There we are. The arts and the classics are not mere luxuries for the elite, or shouldn't be. They belong to everyone. Latin in particular democratizes access to cultural capital, providing students with tools to transcend their circumstances and engage with the broader tapestry of human achievement. The Latin Excellence Programme cost just £4 million, a pittance compared to other government expenditures like £8 million for portraits of King Charles. Cancelling it deprives disadvantaged students of life-changing opportunities, including trips to sites like Pompeii and Roman baths. These experiences inspire, enrich, and elevate. This is not the kind of education we should be championing. The word education is Latin. It means to lead out, not to plug in. Labour's decision to cut Latin reflects a broader discomfort with excellence and intellectual ambition. The classics teach us that education is not just about knowing one's place, but transcending it. By dismantling the Latin Excellence Programme, we risk abandoning this ideal, leaving a generation of students with fewer tools to think critically. Imagine all you have to do is go back to the area I find most fascinating. I think there's two areas I find most fascinating in history. One is the end of the Roman Republic and why it fell, and the rise of Julius Caesar and Sulla and Marius, and the other is the end of the Byzantine Empire, which I remember studying in Oxford with Callistos Ware, and both areas are all about ideas and how ideas are expressed in physical terms, often with a punch, and how ideas led to downfall. And we are today in a world that is governed by ideas. Ideas are fed to us by the internet, by the minute, by the second. And we think we have ideas. Most of the ideas that we process are ideas that we got from other people. They're not our own. We haven't made them our own. We haven't made them our own because we lack the grammar to dissect them. Instead, we parrot what we've heard from the last person we switched on. Latin encourages us to analyze, to dissect, to decode, to parse what we read. And that must be good. And we need to encourage students to think boldly, to imagine boldly, to aspire fearlessly. Latin, like all great education, is not a luxury. It's a necessity. Grammar schools were not called grammar schools simply because it was a nice name. They taught the grammar of Latin. It's something that you can't pick up. You can't pick up how to read Latin. You might be able to pick up a bit of Italian, but you can't pick up Latin. You have to learn it. And once you've learnt it, it never quite goes away. And we abandon Latin at our peril. It's the bedrock of British education.